Hello, friends. Welcome to Wisdom Wednesdays. Today we're carrying on in the book of Proverbs. We're reading from Proverbs chapter 13, actually, which is where we've been for a little bit now. We started a section in verse 12, and it actually goes all the way to verse 19, but I've broken it into two parts. So last week I read verse 12 and 14, or 12 to 14, and this week I'll be reading 15 to 19. And the reason why I consider it a section is it starts with a concept and the same phrase, and you see that same phrase again in verse 19 to close off the section. So it's kind of bookended by the same kind of thought. This is a section in the book of Proverbs called the Proverbs of Solomon. And that means that there are other writers in the book of Proverbs, but the majority of it, because it's a very large section, is from Solomon. So we are continuing on Wisdom Wednesdays, reading in the ESV, chapter 13, verses 15 to 19. Let's begin. Good sense wins favor, but the way of the treacherous is their ruin. In everything the prudent acts with knowledge, but a fool flaunts his folly. A wicked messenger falls into trouble, but a faithful envoy brings healing. Poverty and disgrace come to him who ignores instruction, but whoever heeds reproof is honored. A desire fulfilled is sweet to the soul, but to turn away from evil is an abomination to fools. So the repeated phrase is actually back from verse 12 where it says, but a desire fulfilled is a tree of life. And it ends with a desire fulfilled is sweet to the soul. I looked into the NIV. I like to do that because sometimes I can get some different phrases and it helps me to understand better fully. Also, going back to the Greek, you can do that. But sometimes even just seeing it said differently in English, that works. And in my teaching, I've done that often, where I see some students looking confused, but then I'll phrase it slightly differently and they go, oh, okay, I get it. So that's the beauty of some of the different translations, is they take the Greek and maybe make it more sensical to you. So this is how the NIV says that. In verse 12, where it says a desire fulfilled, the actual word is a longing fulfilled. So a longing fulfilled is a tree of life, and a longing fulfilled is sweet to the soul. So there's this sense that a tree of life, sweet to the soul. And I'm going to just kind of do that actually for this last section that is bookended by these two concepts of a longing being fulfilled, a desire being fulfilled, which is something good because it's referred to as being sweet to your soul, and a tree of life. And then there's in between, there are some, I guess, instructions, reproofs, admonishments about how you actually get that longing fulfilled so that you can experience a tree of life and have a sweetness to the soul, or a satisfaction. I guess, how else could you put that? Peace would be one way of saying that. I've looked that up in the Greek too. So there is this sense that this is bookended, and there's some guidance and wisdom given by Solomon on how that longing being fulfilled, that desire being fulfilled, so that you have a tree of life and a sweetness and a satisfying peace in your soul. There's ways to get that, and he's given you guidance and wisdom around that. Talking about, I could go from the negative side or from the positive side, which says that if you revere the commandment, you're rewarded. If you listen to the wise, you have a fountain of life, which is also the same as the tree of life, or they're connected. The ideas are connected. And then it also says good sense. And the NIV in verse 15, that word good sense is good judgment wins favor. And then the other positive one would be here that in everything, the prudent acts with knowledge, or protects themselves through knowledge, as the NIV puts it. Another thing would be the faithful, or the trustworthy, as it says in verse 17, are an envoy of healing. It talks also about whoever heeds reproof, or whoever heeds correction and instruction is honored. So these are the things that you can do in this larger section. Today I only read from 15, but it starts in verse 12 all the way to 19. Those are the things that lead to this sweet to the soul, the longing being fulfilled, and the tree of life. And then there's the opposite, which is, okay, here's what not to do. And here's where you're going to go if you don't go with the positive way of doing this. So we can go all the way back to what we read last week, which was where it says hope deferred makes the heart sick. So I've been in a place where my hope was deferred, and it's usually because there's evil. There's something going on in your life. Either you are doing that or someone is perpetrating that upon you. Despising the word, which is the Bible, you're bringing destruction on yourself. Those that turn away from the teaching of the wise they're putting themselves in the snares of death. And then back to verse 15, where we started this week, it talks about the way of the treacherous, or in the NIV, it will say the unfaithful is their ruin. So if you have no faithfulness in your life, you're heading towards ruin. It says the fool flaunts or exposes his folly. And I think this happens sometimes unwittingly. They don't want to. Verse 17 says that the wicked messenger falls into trouble. So if you're a wicked messenger, bringing wickedness, speaking lies, spreading gossip, or even just telling about wicked things, it basically is saying that you're going to fall into trouble. And then it says poverty and disgrace come on those who ignore instruction or who disregard discipline. If you disregard discipline, and because that's the phrase that's used in the NIV, poverty and disgrace is going to come your way, which we have learned in the book of Proverbs. Solomon's been very clear about laziness and a lack and slothfulness and a lack of self-control will cause poverty in your life because you're doing nothing to keep yourself out of that situation. So we looked at the positive things, or the righteous things, as Proverbs would put it, that you can do in order to put yourself in a place where the longing will be fulfilled and lead to a tree of life, a fountain of life, and that it is sweet to the soul when those things happen. But then there's the negative way of like don't do these things. So there's the do's and there's the don'ts that are all in here. It's very interesting. I love how Solomon does that. He continually goes back and forth, like, here's the good side, here's what to do, here's what not to do. He's always doing that, going back and forth, basically juxtaposing, putting them on right in front of you very plainly in very clear statements. So this was a greater section from starting in chapter 12, but today we read from verse 15 to 19 in chapter 13 of the book of Proverbs in the ESV on Wisdom Wednesdays. May you be blessed today.